What's up, everyone? Thank you for checking out this episode of Raised A Geek. This week, we review Superpowered, the history of DC Comics, now streaming in 3 parts over on Max. So let's get into it. I'm Chris, and as always, I'm here with my buddy Don. How we doing, man?
Chris, what is up today, my friend? We're doing good. Everything is okay. Cannot complain too much on this hot Sunday in August. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Trying to stay inside. I stepped outside for a little while today and got overheated. So I'm glad we don't do a podcast outdoors.
Yeah, that
Not
would
that,
be
not that that's a thing that
that
anybody
anyone really
does.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a little weird.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. A little sleepy since we were up all night playing video games,
Yeah.
which happened, and having the conundrum of figuring out, I think within this last week, you and I both beat Final Fantasy 16.
Mm-hmm. We
So now
does.
it's that whole thing was you just finished a 50-hour campaign in this massive game. Now what?
My solution for the moment has been up until last night, like try to cut down on my comic book backlog.
Mm,
Um, because those two, we've talked about it before, but those two hobbies have a hard time coexisting in the same space. Like you have enough time to do one. So
yeah.
when one takes up all your time, the other one is suffering. So I'm sitting here playing Final Fantasy for a couple months, and my damn comic book stack is 4 feet tall.
Yeah, just
Not
watching it.
literally,
Doop,
but
doop, doop, doop,
yeah,
doop.
not
It was a
literally
movie
4 feet.
montage. You would watch it, just keep
Right.
looking over at it in disgust.
So my intention has been to chop that down a little bit. I've been trying.
That's
Um,
a good idea. It sounds like the last episode of Noctera or last issue of Noctera for a while is coming out next week.
yeah,
So I was like, all right,
yeah,
I got to catch up to that one.
yeah. I think they're probably going on a hiatus for a while. Which those busy comic creators, they're allowed to do that when they do creator-owned stuff. You like 6 months off. Got to work on my other books.
Yeah.
Um, Happens to Saga all the time. We talked about Saga taking like months and months off for that 4 or 5 year break in the middle there or something. But you know what? If they're turning out good material, it's okay with me.
Right.
Another one of our interests, which we never really talk about on the show that often, is I know we both really used to be into it. I dabble in it a little bit now. I know you still watch it here and there, but it's professional wrestling. Um, we don't talk about it too much on here, but we both like it. We both kind of keep up.
Yeah.
Just now, what was it the other day? I don't know if it's like his last match ever or whatever, but Edge I saw was like pretty much, or his contract ended, right? And he's like had his last match in Canada. He's Canadian. Been in the business for like 25 plus years. What do you think of Edge, man? Where does he go down as, like, in for all the people out there who like wrestling, like where does Edge fall as like one of the all-time greats? Is he kind of like tier one, top of the list, or is he kind of just beneath that? I mean, he's been champion a few times. People listening might not even know who Edge is. So I mean that might have go into it too. Like, we
Yeah.
know who Edge is because we watch wrestling, but like, he had a long, lengthy career with a lot of highlights. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you
If you
think
watched
about
wrestling in the 90s, the Attitude Era, Edge became a huge part of that with the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys and Edge and Christian and Kurt Angle. And I mean, if you watched it in the 90s, then you know who Edge was. If you missed the 90s, then you might not
it?
know who Edge is. Granted, his bigger time was in the 2000s when he became a heavyweight
The
champ.
rated R superstar
The
era?
live sex celebration in the middle of the ring. That
That
was awkward.
was
Uh,
weird.
I think he's just underneath. He was still someone that when he won the championship, I remember thinking Edge is champion. He
Yeah.
owned it, and he became like what he needed to be for that era. And like I said, I think he is probably bigger than I have any expectation of him being.
Hmm.
I always liked Edge. He put on good
Yeah,
matches. He was always entertaining. You put him, Edge, and Christian together was always gold.
sure.
Um, Team Eck with Kurt Angle, that was always good. But yeah, they said his looks like his last match on his contract was on SmackDown, which seems like a weird way for him to go out with no like announcement. That was always his thing because he had a 9 year like retirement because of his neck.
Yeah.
So then coming back, I want to retire on my own terms, but then to kind of almost have this retirement without it being a retirement is like,
And
wait,
then wasn't his opponent just like Sheamus? Kind of
yeah,
like, okay. I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
guess.
So it's just kind of weird, but they were treating it on Friday like it was the last
mhm.
time you'll ever see him. His wife's in the front row crying, and like I'm like,
Yeah.
huh, it's kind of weird. And then today I saw that there were all these rumors now of like, is Edge going to AEW?
Oh shoot. Go
Yeah,
join his boy over there,
yeah.
Christian Cage.
Because supposedly when Edge was talking about doing a comeback, AEW was offering him hefty money to come back over there, and he said, I have to talk to Vince first, and he has to have first grabs. If he wants me, then he gets me. So, but now it's been a couple of years, so now could he just be like, Christian's been telling me a lot of cool stuff over there. I want to go
Yeah,
check out this AEW and wrestle some of these people
that's possible. I
and
don't know.
finish with his buddy.
Yeah. I just thought I would ask.
Yeah,
He just had an interesting career to me. I respect his where he got to from where he started.
never would have imagined it.
Never would have imagined it. I kind of when he first premiered, he was like he's a lifelong mid carder. He's got a weird gimmick. He's like a vampire kind of, and like just like this weird dude. And somehow he kept the name Edge through the whole thing. Like didn't even use really. He's Edge, and just
Yeah,
like somehow won multiple championships and was great on the microphone and had some great matches with all these legendary Hall of Fame people. So shout out to Edge. Good WWE career there.
yeah, yeah. If this is it, good run there.
Yeah. Did you just hear something weird in your house? Look like you seen a ghost.
It sounded like a plane right above my house.
Oops.
So I was like, wait a second, please. I was waiting for like the like
Uh,
larger noise of it, like the wheels clipping my roof or something stupid.
this video would go viral in a second. If there's a
Yeah,
podcaster has plane go through house
yeah,
live on Zoom.
yeah, yeah. Podcaster gets Donnie Darkoed. Yes.
Oh goodness.
Spoilers for Donnie Darko. I think that's how they open that movie. We should watch that movie. That should be the next movie we watch and talk about on this show.
Not a bad choice.
When
Not
was
a
the last
bad
time you watched Donnie Darko?
uh 25 years. I
Yeah,
don't know how long has that movie been
yeah.
around. Yeah.
That's probably. I remember watching it. Yeah, I feel like I watched it a couple times and like when
Yeah.
it was the thing, and I never watched it again.
Yeah.
Anyway, talking.
Launch Jake Gyllenhaal's career, I think.
Hell yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Talking about 25 years ago, we're doing a history dive here. We're going to talk about. We checked out the DC Comics Superpowered documentary over on Max. Wasn't really knowing if I was going to watch it or not because I felt like it was going to be a lot of DC kissing their own ass. Like,
Mhm.
hey, we're DC. They did a lot more leveling of the playing field and a lot more honesty than I expected them to do. They still kind of covered some stuff, brushed past some of their foibles there, where they were like, we don't want to
Yeah.
talk too much about this.
Yeah.
But we decided to check that out and we wanted to talk about it and kind of give our little reactions, reviews to it this week.
Yeah, we thought it would be interesting to do. I think this documentary launched on Max, like kind of coinciding with San Diego Comic Con. They brought it out around the same time that,
Mm-hmm.
so it's been like a week or so. I don't know, and just kind of sit and talk about the state of DC with you a little bit. Like we
Yeah,
we we talk about it here and there on this show. Like they're doing stuff the right way. They're changing things. They messed up here. They messed up there. So we're just gonna lay it all out on the table. And I don't know, just talk about the doc a little bit. It's an interesting watch for those who are into comic books and into the history of things, as they say. So yeah,
yeah, it was a well put together documentary. It was a nice 3 episode kind of breakdown of that, and I liked seeing all the history aspects of it. I mean, they went back to 1934 when DC Comics was founded, and to follow that journey through World War II and the 60s, 70s, and I mean, literally all the way to present day was really kind of a cool overview of seeing the impact of just like DC Comics and really kind of the impact of superheroes. Superman specifically
mm-hmm.
was a large chunk of just like what they did, but just to see how just within the times changed as the times changed to see how those characters tried to adapt to stay relevant, even when they
Yeah,
couldn't stay relevant and sometimes didn't. And did talk about, I know there was the big comics crash in the 90s when everything,
yeah. Like
the bubble burst.
Marvel filed bankruptcy somewhere in there too, and
Yeah, and I think DC did too.
yeah, probably.
Somewhere in
There's been
there.
multiple times in the history where the world has thought the comics industry was going to end. It's not just one; it's multiple times, and I'm
Yeah.
sure not the last time either. It's just a thing that keeps happening.
They got some good, I mean, I could see that, but with these, I mean, we're kind of on, I think, more of a comic book movie bubble
Mm-hmm.
that seems to be bursting as we're sitting here recording this on Blue Beetle weekend, making 25 million in the lowest grossing opening weekend for it's fighting with Barbie in its fifth week for the number one spot. So there's
Yeah,
kind of an interesting thing there where I know people could talk about superhero fatigue
yeah.
and whether it's real or not. And, I kind of fall in the camp that it's a little real. It always depends on the movie, but
No, it is real. We've talked about it. It is real. It's I don't know. Just listening to you say that right now, like saying Blue Beetle is struggling to, even beat out Barbie,
mhm.
um, which has more legs than anybody ever thought it would. But that's more of an indictment, I think, on people's feeling about superhero movies. And I'm started thinking in my head, like, man, really, what is the next Marvel DC doesn't matter. What is the next superhero film that's gonna like blow the world up again? Kind of the way Avengers Endgame did and No Way Home did. Like, what is the
Superman.
next one that's gonna do that? Maybe that, but like, I don't know. Is it like possibly?
What I
Uh,
mean depends on even when these movies. I mean, we got writers and actors strikes, so I mean, we might be talking 2030 before we get another.
yeah,
Superman set for 2025 right now. Is that gonna the longer these strikes go, it might be even later. So it might be even longer. And if the Marvels is the next Marvel movie set to come out, do you think that's gonna get delayed
I don't think it's gonna get delayed because it's already made. But
if they can't do promotion for it
yeah, but movies have just been coming out like
so far?
Barbie and Oppenheimer came out with no promotion either. They couldn't like do red carpets for that either.
Yeah,
So it's um yeah, I don't know. Maybe Deadpool 3 when it hits will like have
yeah,
enough
that.
juice.
But that's its own thing. I feel like that's in a different category.
It's superhero.
It is. You're right. You're right. You're right. I'll give you that. All right. Let's dive into this docu-series here. Here's a quick description for those who haven't grasped what it's about here and what we're going to talk about. But Superpowered, the DC story, is a three-part docu-series narrated by Rosario Dawson that examines the history and cultural impact of DC Comics, founded in 1934 as National Comics Publications. The docu-series, now streaming on Max, interviews a number of writers, artists, and creative executives at DC. It also interviews DECU. I was like, that sounded wrong to me, right? It's DCEU, not DECU, right?
Yeah,
Come on,
DCEU.
Decider, who wrote this article.
Typo.
DCEU and Arrowverse directors and producers like Patty Jenkins, James Gunn, and Greg Berlantini, as well as actors who played DC superheroes like Gal Gadot, Robert Pattinson, Henry Cavill, and Linda Carter. So that was kind of
Among others. Among others.
among others. My first feeling for this documentary, which is probably going to come off as hate, but whatever. There was a lot of Patty Jenkins in this. She was like the first
Yeah.
person talking, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't want to hear from Patty Jenkins.
Well, yes. Um, and you get the feeling right away that this was filmed when she was still on good terms with DC, because which is well publicized, she no longer is. I don't think she's in the plans for the future moving forward after James Gunn's um, ascendance as kind of the Feige of the DC world. And so even him being in this, I think they were just interviewing him as like, this is our suicide director, James
Yeah,
Gunn. It wasn't
it,
him as the head of DC Entertainment yet. So
no,
this movie came out at a time before this regime change. This doc like was filmed before the regime
yeah,
change. So it is a little funny to kind of look at that and be like, we're talking to Zachary Levi about Shazam 2 and how much fun he had. Like, no one gives a shit. No one would care about that now. Like,
yeah.
you know, um,
Now
so
we
that
saw the
was
movie, and
funny.
I'm glad he
Right.
had fun because I didn't.
I sure as hell did not. But yeah, a lot of Patty Jenkins, a lot of that, which is fine. I respect her passion for the character, which she kind of put forth, but
It definitely showed. I definitely can agree with that. Like watching her, listening to her talk about Wonder Woman and the importance of it, listening to her talk to her, the importance, and just seeing the passion that she had for that first Wonder Woman. It's just crazy how Wonder Woman 84 just blew up her entire career. Like she lost Wonder Woman 3, she lost Star Wars. Like literally, we're just like, oh, this is what you do. Okay, we're good.
Well, I think honestly, like, yeah, I don't want to be like a hater, like you said, but it's one of these things that can be like studied
Yeah,
in future generations of how big of a fall from grace a director can have with like goodwill of the people. And it's not based on her being a bad person or her whatever. It's just based on how was your first movie this and your sequel is this. And they're so far apart and so different from each other. Like I don't think we're in the minority in thinking that, right? Like I think
no,
Wonder Woman 84 is generally thought of
generally,
as a mediocre movie.
yeah.
But like really mediocre, like bad, like it
No,
sucks.
yes,
So it's kind of crazy how I still don't understand to this day when I think about it how she went from part one to 84. I really don't, and I
I
don't know if I ever will.
I can tell you.
What do you think?
The only common denominator that I ever noticed that they did when I was watching Wonder Woman 1984 is she wrote Wonder Woman 84. So she wasn't just a director bringing the script to life. She was involved in, like, she was deeply involved in the creative process, and sometimes that's just not for everybody. And there were decisions that got made. It was like there was just no, I know we talk about WB just kind of being overly involved with their things and kind of hurting the movies, but this almost sounded like one where they were like, yeah, do whatever you want, and she did
Mm-hmm.
whatever she wanted, and you're just like, oh, that's what you gave us. Like, this is
Yeah.
campy. I think they just got caught up in the 1980s aspect of it, and they were like, let's make a 1980s superhero movie. People will love it. People love the 80s, the nostalgia.
It wasn't even that 80s, except for when they were in like the
Oh,
mall
I
and
know.
playing some kind of 80s song. The rest was just crap.
Yeah, but they still kept like the visuals of like an old Christopher Reeve Superman, and like it just, I don't know, unless they just were that bad. I feel like they had to be doing it on purpose, and it just didn't work.
Yeah. It's very odd.
It's
It's
just odd. But yes, Patty Jenkins was interviewed quite a bit in this. And like I said, I enjoyed aspects of it. And then there were other aspects where I was like, all right. It's
yeah.
just because it always just reminds me of Wonder Woman 84. And,
uh
nobody likes to think about that,
nobody does.
except for the
Um
10% of people who loved it.
is there even 10%? I don't know.
I'm being
We're
generous.
we're making them mad at us right now by
Oh,
doing
yeah. They stopped listening. They were like, how dare you? The Jenkin heads were like, we are so mad at you right
the
now.
Jenkins head. It had the cheetah in it. Um,
Kristen Wiig was a marvel, cinematic marvel.
I don't know. Speaking
Playing
of
Selena Kyle. I mean, whatever her name was.
right, um, I don't know. Speaking of the Wonder Woman, I kind of like the first episode, the beginning, how it kind of started, like you said, with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and kind of running through their histories.
Yeah,
That was like some of the most interesting stuff of the entire 3 hours to me.
yeah,
You know, fi- looking at the path that Bob Kane took, and then he had his guy, what was his name, like Bill Finger or something like that, like his ghost. I know it. I think it's last name Finger, but the guy who basically like ghostwrited Batman the whole way.
yeah,
And Bob Kane always like got the credit, but really most of the like the stories came from
yeah. Bill Finger,
him.
you were right.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill Finger like really did all the heavy lifting of Batman,
He
even
created
though
the entire lore, which is a shame that like Bob Kane or just in general nobody knew until after Bill Finger passed,
right.
and then everyone was like, "Oh, by the way, it was this guy.
Yeah.
He came up with
Yeah.
Gotham City and the Joker and all of these villains and all of these characters."
Yeah, and he was someone who Bob Kane had just hired to
Yeah,
like fill out like I got this character now do all the hard stuff,
yeah,
and Bill Finger didn't really get credit, so that was cool to see. And like Jeremy or Jerry Siegel and the guy who created Superman, I like that whole story. And even
mm-hmm.
the Wonder Woman stuff, it was I didn't know a lot of that stuff, like who created them and how he felt about the women's movement and this and that, and like the original Wonder Woman comics and why they were made, and to kind of like shift the male dominated comics industry at the time and give people a different, like, a woman to root for. A woman can be a hero too. And yeah, like I said, all the Superman stuff was really interesting. So I like that stuff the most. Like, that was in the first hour of this doc, and I was like, oh, this is great. I love even some of the stuff I knew. I just like seeing it and hearing about it again.
Yeah, it was fun to hear the perspective with Superman and just the idea that you had these two Jewish guys that created him, and then how much of Superman's story was tied into like the immigrant story of coming to America and trying to fit in, but trying to blend in and not be seen as who you are. And so you don't kind of be like, oh, you're not American enough, but then creating this like ultimate like apple pie, you know, character like who became America, but he's technically an immigrant that theoretically, as we saw when he decided to not change his slogan, and there are a large sect of our government, you know, our political party that decided, oh my God, Superman is anti-American now, and it
Mm-hmm.
made the news, and that was ridiculous. But
Yeah.
when people only care about Superman, you don't know shit about Superman. I remember when they did the whole John Kent being bisexual, and everyone was like, Superman. We're like, it's not Superman, it's his son. It's a completely different character. But like the media didn't. They
And
were
also
just
you,
like, Clark Kent is bisexual now, and
yeah.
they're like Lois Lane. You're like, wait, you want him to bang his mom? My Superman only sleeps with Lois Lane, and you're like, wait, that's his mom though. You
And
sicko.
you're Superman. Also, you've never read a comic book in your entire life. Who's ever writing this
Yeah,
freaking puff piece for
yeah,
Fox News or whoever? Like,
yeah.
stay out of this. Like, you got enough going on with all your other bullshit. Like, don't worry about what the hell Superman's doing.
Right.
Uh,
I know, but it was just funny. But I mean, it shows that like I just like that idea of, you know, it kind of adds this extra layer to the character that I feel like I knew that, but just really hearing it in the way that they described it and really digging into kind of like what America was like and life for immigrants coming to, you know, America, and what the things that they were dealing with, and seeing how back in the 1930s they were like paralleling that with Superman's story, and they were really telling their story through Superman, and then just seeing how that exploded and really realizing it's like Superman really was kind of like the first superhero ever. And then, like, just them really going through all of that was really cool for me.
no, yeah, I enjoyed all of that. Like, especially like you said, seeing all the reaction to these heroes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we the people, American people hadn't seen something like that. So like, you had little kids wearing homemade Superman
Mm-hmm.
shirts, and these little kids buying comic books from like the local drugstore and everything, and spinner racks and all that. And uh it's when the world felt differently about comic books, kind of more than they do now. It was like more mainstream, more like super accepted, and just, I don't know, different. So it was cool seeing that the first hour of the doc kind of start off with that, the Trinity that we all know. You know,
Yeah.
everyone thinks DC, you think Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. It was
Yeah.
just
Everything
it was
else
just fun.
is
Yeah,
outside of the realm of
yeah.
public consumption.
Mm-hmm. Fringe stuff. You know what
Yeah.
I
I
mean?
mean, almost everything outside of those three
Pretty
struggles.
much.
I mean,
Pretty
Zack
much.
Snyder got a little bit of love with the Flash. Um, I really liked when they really dove into the Flash, and when they kind of turned brought the Flash back. And I forgot who did it. It wasn't
The
Jeff Johns. It was the one. It was the first time they brought Flash back before, like in the 50s, and they made him
Okay.
like scientific and really fleshed out his character and influenced all these kids in the 50s and 60s to be scientists and astronauts and doing all that stuff. And that was really cool.
Yeah, your wife is a scientist. You should ask her if she was influenced by the Flash.
Yeah, she wasn't.
Yeah, yeah, that was cool. It kind of, it did show that boom of time where kids were into science and like science s and rockets and lab stuff, and they made a superhero like that. And I thought it was cool that they kind of said, made it seem like, or they let you know, Flash was made as a character where um how he got his abilities and powers is like, oh, he's an everyman. He's like you and me. This could have happened to you and me. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
can't be Superman. We're not an alien. We can't be Bruce Wayne. We're not a billionaire. We
Mm-hmm.
can't be Wonder Woman. We're not an Amazon. But Flash is just like a guy who lightning struck him, and he's like, I have superpowers. Of course, kids are gonna like that. They're like, that could be me. I wish lightning would strike me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what I
We
mean?
all had those thoughts as a kid.
Yeah.
How
Why
can I
can't
get gamma
what?
radiation and turn into the Hulk?
Why won't a radioactive spider bite me
That's
so
the
I can
biggest
be?
one. Like that one, even though that is ridiculous to think of, like
Yeah,
that is one that you always kind of thought it could happen. Like I could get bit by a radioactive spider and become Spider-Man, right?
that
That can
seems
happen.
possible. I wouldn't get ridiculous stage 4 cancer and die immediately from that radioactive spider bite, right?
Right. Wouldn't have to be
Um,
quarantined and studied. They
right.
never want to study Spider-Man for how he is what he is.
Yeah, right. Every other superhero they want to capture him and put him in tubes and study him, and
Mm-hmm.
not Spider-Man. He's
Nope,
just
they're
a
just kind of cool.
they're cool with him
They're cool
because
with him. He's a
he's a yuck
menace,
yuck
but
factor.
he's a menace because he's just it sells newspapers, not because he might be contagious.
True.
He should be a menace because he's not in quarantine for being radioactively bitten. But that was still that doesn't mean that I didn't want to get bit by a radioactive spider when I was a kid watching that
You and me,
'90s cartoon
you and me both, buddy.
voiced
You
by
and me
Greg
both.
Brady. Wasn't that the
That's true.
oldest Brady son?
Oh yeah.
And he was the voice of Spider-Man in that '90s cartoon. That was good shit.
The more you know.
What was hilarious was realizing how early in the run of just DC Comics that they created the multiverse or parallel universes. I did not know that they went back to like the '60s to do that.
Hmm.
Like they that was crazy to think that they were kind of convoluting up their universe way back then.
Yeah, and then they let it be known that they were pretty much like the first to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They like did multiverses before multiverses were done by everybody.
I mean, by decades.
Yeah. So early DC Comics, you had 10 different Flashes, 10 different Superman, each on their own different Earth and whatever. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. I've always like, we like DC Comics, but there's a ton of stuff, and we can talk about it. There's a ton of stuff we haven't read. Not enough time in the day. Don't have the resources to buy books from 50 years ago. Doesn't mean I don't want to, but there's plenty of stuff we haven't read, which one of them is for me the Crisis on Infinite Earths,
Mm-hmm.
which they talked about in this as being like when DC decided, okay, things are getting out of control with this multiverse stuff. We have to do a story where we kind of just make it one Earth and start everything over and make these books more accessible to new readers and new people. So that is one that maybe one day I'd like to read and just see like its historic place in comics as being, oh, this is when they decided to stop doing that multiverse stuff. But I'm sure that was all cool,
For a little
but
bit.
it totally gets confusing. Like multiverse gets confusing. I'm sorry what anyone says. Like in comics, in movies, as we see, which is happening right now in the MCU, like things get all convoluted and twisted up with this. So making it just like one world sometimes isn't the worst idea.
No, so the Crisis for Infinite Earths was how they reset it, but then Flashpoint they were resetting it again, or is that when they reopened up multiple? Because I know the Flashpoint came turned into the New 52.
Right. But
So
that's
what were they
many
resetting?
years. That's many years later
Yo,
though.
I
That's
know the
long.
Crisis on
Yeah.
Infinite Earth was what '80s.
Something like that. Yeah. I think.
We're sounding terrible because we don't pay attention to specific
So years.
things, years basically. So then they kind of put it all together into one, but then they ended up breaking it up again at some point because Flashpoint
Oh yeah.
had to erase everything.
Yeah. I'm sure at some point they reinstated the multiverse stuff after Crisis on Infinite Earths,
Mm-hmm.
but um yeah, Flashpoint was just kind of another way into what led us into the New 52.
That was a
Um,
reboot. That was more of a reboot than a bring together.
yeah, um, I don't know. New 52, I may have spoken about it on the show before, but like New 52 is what brought me back to comics.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've talked about that we liked comics a lot as kids. Um, but then, somewhere in my 20s and whatever, I kind of let it go and stopped reading and doing other stuff. But um, I don't know, just somewhere along the line when before New 52 came out, I kind of read about it somewhere. It's like, oh, every single comic book is going to be a new number one and a
Mm-hmm.
new creative team and like new stories, and you're not bogged down by all this, because that has always been the most like daunting thing about for new readers getting into comics. You want to read a Batman, you want to read Superman, you want to read whatever, name whatever thing you want, and you go to the store and you pick up a new issue and you look and it's like issue 137 of something, and you're like, well, I don't know what's going on. Is this going to be like right in the middle of a story? What is it? And then like every now and then they will say things such as start of a new arc, but you still feel weird because it's like this is number 89. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of this. So the new 52 was perfect for me at that time because it was like everything's number one. I got a bunch of the new number ones, read a bunch of those series for a long time. I know a lot of people like to shit on the new 52, but I really liked a lot of what came out of that. That's the era that got me into Scott Snyder as much as I am now. He was one of the standouts of that time. I really liked Jeff Johns and Jim Lee's Justice League to start when it was just them two for the first few arcs. Um, got me into Animal Man and Swamp Thing as characters, two characters I never really read before. So a lot of good came out of New 52 for me, and like has kept me reading comics now for the next 15 years it's been since then. But so um yeah, I don't know. That's my little New 52 rant.
No, I 100% agree with you. New 52, the same thing. As I said, as kids, we tried, but when you don't have a car, you don't have
Right.
consistent money, you got other stuff, it's hard to keep up with comics unless you're really dedicated, and we weren't. So we were
Mm-hmm.
dedicated for little periods of time, but then it became too hard. And then, like I said, then it's always just pockets of time. But yeah, some New 52, 100% just wanted. I was just looking through my box of I have a whole box of New 52s, and seeing those 2 years of Animal Man and Swamp Thing and Aquaman and Batman and um,
Mm-hmm.
Batwing and Batwoman, and I mean, I pretty much got
All the
all
Bat
of them,
family.
like the whole Bat family in there,
Yeah.
just to try that. And yeah, it was just a good thing to get into. It was fun. It just kind of the hype was real. And it just, like I said, New 52 got me back in as well. And yeah, I've been pretty much consistent since then. It was like, okay, let's just keep this
Mm-hmm.
going. And
Yeah, even though you and I are both kind of more into like creator owned indie stuff now, more so than superhero comics, but I still do read my good amount of DC superhero comics. I think the only people that really bothered at the time, the New 52, was readers of DC who were caught up and they're like, I don't want to start over.
yeah,
I know, like, I'm invested in these stories you guys are telling now. But they were
yeah,
trying to reach more of a broad audience and kind of get, like rekindle a love for, and it worked for people like us.
it worked for
But
a lot of people. I mean, it was definitely a success. Even if you
mm,
had the haters for it, I think it did more good than bad for at least the business side of comic
right,
books,
right,
than as opposed to the like I said, the passionate vocal group definitely
yeah,
weren't happy about it. But you know what? They still probably read it all and still
yeah,
probably enjoyed their plenty of it. But yeah, to be able to get Jeff Johns doing Aquaman and really see what he did with that, I did read that as much as I shit on Jeff Johns for Doomsday Clock. But
I think a lot of people liked his Aquaman, his New 52
yeah,
Aquaman. It was
I really enjoyed the new 52 Aquaman. I was for however long I read it.
mhm.
Like I said, Animal Man with Jeff Lemire. Yeah, like I said, it introduced me to a lot of the writers that are really big now and
Yep.
were coming up at the time, and kind of New 52 gave them their names. So yeah, New 52, I was super excited for them to talk about that era and to really just see what that looked like because I remember it.
Yeah, I wish they would have maybe talked about it a little more. One
Yeah.
thing with this doc is they did sometimes glaze over things. And I know here's what I wanted to talk about too about this documentary is I know you mentioned a little bit, it kind of lets you in and see another side, and they spoke sometimes fairly. Sometimes I think they didn't go far enough on some of these things. And I think that is a um product of them kind of having DC, I think, obviously had final say over this.
Yeah.
This is on Max, which is owned by Warner Brothers, so they're not going to rip themselves too hard. You know what I mean?
No.
This is kind of like The Last Dance. Michael Jordan had final say. Like he never made himself look like a bad guy. Like I love that documentary, but watching it with clear eyes, you're like, he produced this. He's the one saying what's said. Like
Mm-hmm.
he comes off as like the hero no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Makes Scottie Pippen over there look like an asshole all day or whatever. Uh, anyway, but they also do that with oh, I just had another example when they do that. Like I think this new I like the latest NFL quarterback thing you and I were talking about that's on Netflix. But these quarterbacks have final say over it. Like Kirk Cousins has, control kind of over how he comes off. Still entertaining, but like they're always like squeaky clean. They're never going to show the bad side.
Yeah.
This doc, I feel like, did that a little bit. I
Yeah,
mean,
100%. Especially when they
we,
were talking about the DCEU.
yeah, we're glazing over, the first Justice League and all the issues that had with like what's that director's name? Why can't I think? Josh Whedon.
Joss
Like,
Whedon, yeah.
yeah, we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about any of that stuff. I don't know. It sometimes felt like a promotional video that I was watching for DC rather than like if I wanted a real documentary on like everything, the good, the bad, the dirt, everything. I don't think you're gonna find that on Max. You're not getting Jim Lee to do interviews for that. You're not getting all these people. So sometimes I feel like they could have went a little further with stuff, but I mean, I get it. I understand.
And that was my holdup just from even when I watched the trailer for it and kind of where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to watch this because that's what I was nervous it was going to be. Like, I'm like, they are just going to kind of like celebrate themselves, pat themselves on the back for how great they are. And
Which
they
they
kind of
kind of
did.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because they went through the history of it and got to see there was a lot of nostalgia and there was just a lot of cool stories being told. And especially they were a little bit more open. I guess they were more open about like the culture, but it was
Mhm.
always how like they were the victims of people were
Right.
treating our comics bad because they'd had horror themes or,
Hmm.
some of those things. And we were the pioneers of this. So yes, there was a lot of
I
patting
mean,
themselves on the back. And I
there's
agree.
certain people you could probably talk to that would turn around and say everything they said and be like, "Well, this was my experience, and I worked for a bunch of a holes over there." You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So,
Yeah.
that's kind of going to happen though when it's their thing and it's
Mm-hmm.
on their channel and their network.
Of course.
I get so.
I mean, would
Uh,
you do any different?
no, I guess if you want the real underground DC story, one day somebody will have to make a doc who is completely neutral. It will not be on Max, um, and we'll have to see. But yeah, just kind of wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I always find it funny when you watch these documentaries or just any documentary, not even about comic books, but I always find it funny how, like, when you see stuff of how the culture, just American culture was in the 50s and the 80s and the 90s today, and realizing that we haven't changed all that much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were still having the same conversations politically and culturally of just the same things that we're talking about today. And I mean, we're making strides and it is different. Things are handled differently, or at least there is more exception to things, but at the same time, it's still very small and it's still the same arguments that politically are happening on, what the American dream is, what the American family looks like, what,
Yep.
all these stupid things that people have way too much energy to focus on. But
Yeah.
it's just always crazy to me when you watch these things and realize, hey, they're still talking about this, which means they haven't figured shit out about
No,
equality.
we sure haven't.
Yeah.
In some ways, we have.
In some ways, there are people who are consciously trying to be aware of biases and be aware of how they looked at things, and are aware of those things, and through our entertainment, they're trying, which of course they always like to overdo sometimes and ram it
Mm,
down your throats to the point where people get agitated and create their own drama. uh
yeah.
or backlash with the other. There's tasteful ways to do things, and sometimes they don't always pick that route, which kind of can do more harm than good. But there are a lot of things that we do better today and handle better. But at the same time, it's like from a legislation standpoint, they're still
Oh,
having the same conversations to figure out what do we do. It's like, wait, we've
if
been having
not
this
worse.
conversation for 80 years.
Yeah, the political climate is, if not the same, it might even be worse than it was back then, as
A little
far as
bit.
some of that stuff goes. But yeah,
But
I agree with that.
but I liked seeing how the comics tried to keep up with that and tried to change that. Obviously, we got a lot of that when we started talking about more present day stuff with the Pride. Um,
Mhm.
that was where we talked about earlier with Jonathan Kent being bisexual and making those kind of adjustments and changes to characters. But I did like how they put it, where they're like, well, we're trying to you know, make these characters for appealing to the kids
And everybody, right?
and everybody. But I mean, you're also like, you have to speak to the younger generation to keep comics going. So it's like there are things that we just age out of. And I mean, if you still enjoy it, you still enjoy it, but you need to like remember that it's not really for you. There are aspects of comics that are for adults or for anybody. But I mean, you have to remember that if you don't understand Gen Z,
Yeah,
or what Gen Z does annoys you, well, we're about,
yeah.
we're aging out of the, 18 to 45 demographic, which means we're about to be too old.
And also, you can just try to have this thing that they call an open mind and
Yeah.
just like accept stories that don't completely like reflect your life.
Yeah.
You can read a story that doesn't isn't just you looking in the mirror at yourself
Yeah.
and still find it enjoyable and still enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
Some people are not capable of that, which is
Apparently.
which is a sad fact. But yeah, uh
It's just, like I said, it's crazy to watch and to see, but it was really cool to see those things change, and to see them just, try. And they're telling stories that are different. And I think from like a my standpoint, it's like I like to read those stories because I like to see something different and try to understand
yeah,
how other people see stuff. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they're done well, sometimes they're not done well. Or sometimes I can't relate and I just don't get a lot out of it. It just depends.
right.
But, it's still, I enjoy that they do that. And it was fun to see that DC Comics, and I'm sure just comics in general, did that, kind of
Mhm.
really tried to stay as relevant as possible, as soon as like as quick as possible. It's kind of like they always talk about South Park does their, cartoons like a week before they air so they could be like super topical. It
Right.
was like comic books were almost able to do that more than like TV or movies. Movies are always so far behind
Mhm.
what the general population wants, because it's like, oh, we love this, and then you're like, you knew it when with multiverse, when they did the Spider-Man No
Mhm.
Way Home with the multiverse and the multiple Spider-Man, and you're like, all right, get ready, because now that this was successful, we're going to get the next 5 years, we're going to get all kinds of crazy crap of like, let's mix some series together and mix different franchises together. And
The Flash.
yeah,
um
and Flash would have been more timely if they didn't delay it 4 years, but
yeah, one of its many problems. I don't know. I like what you're saying there about that stuff, and I think some of that was interesting to see that Marvel pushed them to do a lot of that stuff.
mm-hmm.
I think Marvel was featured in this documentary more than I kind of thought they were going to be.
Yeah,
Them like kind of talking about their direct competitor, and they have been competitors for, decades
yeah,
upon decades, and just kind of seeing them flash Marvel stuff and like, ooh, Marvel got edgy and they went here and they started talking about, like racial issues and political rioting and women's issues and war and stuff. And like DC's still on this side doing like Superman as the Boy Scout. And this is the era of Adam
can't be
West
Batman.
Batman.
Yeah,
Yeah, where he's just, laughing and joking and bam, wham, zap, whatever. And Marvel's over here doing this stuff, and that kind of pushed them to do their things. Like Marvel had came with Black Panther as like this, you know, oh, he's a black superhero. Then a couple years later, DC has Black Lightning. They're like, oh, we're trying to keep up with you guys. We got to do this stuff too.
yeah,
Um, that was kind of interesting to me to see Marvel kind of push DC to go to certain places, and it worked in a lot of cases. Sometimes DC went further than Marvel with some of their adult content,
yeah,
like the whole Vertigo line. I liked that whole segment.
yeah.
Um, Talking to Neil Gaiman and Sandman and Grant Morrison and all the stuff he did, and
Alan
like
Moore.
Alan Moore. Oh
Finding
yeah,
old ass Alan Moore interviews where he'd talk about comic books.
seeing him young and like seeing Frank Miller young like blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, Frank Miller Young creeped me out a little bit.
Yeah, I was like, he looks like a regular person,
Yeah.
not some old troll under a bridge. Uh,
All right, we just got canceled. Um,
no, no, but that was fun.
no, yeah, it
Seeing
definitely
all
was.
that
They
stuff.
reached through and found, and just realizing how those books, like those are all books that I heard of but didn't know how to read. Like
Mm-hmm.
Sandman, I've always known Sandman was a thing, but never really knew. how to get involved. Sometimes there's those stories like I didn't realize that Sandman was just like 85 issues or 86 issues and it was done.
You thought it was like mountains of book
Yeah,
that you
because
could never
that's
read, right?
yeah, I've been hearing about Sandman for 20 years. So I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know how the fuck to read Sandman. Like it sounds really cool. I love Neil Gaiman. Like I'm down. Like this sounds
Mhm.
perfect, but I don't know how to read it, and then I
Mhm.
realized, oh wait, it's just like 4 books and
Yeah.
it's not that
Yeah.
hard. It's not that complicated. They've just been milking the franchise for
All right.
20 more years.
They've been holding it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I had that vision of Sandman being something that some mountain I could never climb when I was like at a certain age. Like, I can't do that. That's something I had to have read at the beginning and like kept up
Yeah.
with. And there's like encyclopedias of Sandman stuff. I can't read this. And I didn't read Sandman until like my adult life,
Yeah.
probably not maybe like, 10 years ago. And it's like I never read this. This is a piece of literature.
Yeah.
Same thing with like Watchmen, Alan Alan Moore's Watchmen, a lot of Grant Morrison stuff too.
Yeah.
Um, they've got a lot of stuff in their stable like that. That's just like this is really good. Just like books, even if it didn't have pictures, like this would stand up with anybody's
Yeah.
books. Like talking about Watchmen being among the top 100 pieces of literature to ever exist. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
as a comic book, it's kind of crazy. Um, so yeah, that was a really interesting segment too.
Yeah, I loved hearing about that. And those were a lot of stories that I always wanted to read. And I'm sitting there writing down book series. I'm like, all right, I need to read Kingdom Come. That sounds
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Yeah,
It makes me want to
Mark
bust out.
Wade's a great writer. Yeah.
Yeah, it made me want to bust out Watchmen and kind
Mm-hmm.
of read through that again. It's been years since I had the urge in 2009 with the Watchmen HBO series.
Right.
Was that 2009?
No, I think it's been more recent than
I
that.
think it was more recent than 2009. But
Yeah.
with the Watchmen HBO series, which they talked about, and just really seeing what they did with that, makes me want to watch. What makes me want to watch that again? On top of makes me want to read the
Want to
Watchmen
read?
book.
Yeah.
And yeah, Kingdom Come. Uh, what was the other one? Watchmen, Kingdom Come. We talked about the Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Well, I know you said you wanted to rebust out some Frank Miller, like Dark Knight.
Oh yeah, I already
His
pulled. I
Dark
went and
Knight.
grabbed the Blu-ray of Dark Knight Returns, the two
Yeah.
part movie. I was
Yeah.
like, man, I haven't watched this in years. I need to watch this
Mhm.
again. So I was planning on watching that this weekend. I haven't gotten to it yet, but
Yeah. They had like Doom Patrols in there. I never read Doom Patrol. A bunch of stuff. Yeah, I'm with you. I have Kingdom Come. I told you, sitting up here on a shelf. I've had it and just haven't read it. I was like, I gotta read that. I like Mark Waid as a writer. The
yeah,
story sounds amazing. Them like coming out of retirement to stop this new age of younger superhero,
yeah,
and it's like drawn by Alex Ross, who is mostly known as a cover artist
yeah,
because his covers are so damn iconic and
yeah,
intricate. He usually all he has to do is covers. But
yeah,
like he did the interiors of this book. Like we got to read this.
yeah.
So I don't know why I haven't. It's on the list.
I struggle with graphic novels because I still have a backlog of single issues. So I'm like,
Well,
well,
yeah.
I'm like, oh, I got all these graphic novels. I have a Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. That I'm like, all right, that's on the top of my graphic novel list to read once I catch up. Well,
You never catch up.
yeah, you never catch up. So it's just
another
kind of
one,
frustrating in that way.
another one. I think I wanted to read after hearing. For years I've meant to check out Alan Moore's Swamp Thing
Hmm.
because he writes it's apparently like the definitive Swamp Thing. Um, we talked about Scott Snyder's New 52 one. I'm sure the Alan Moore one probably had a lot to do with that.
I'm
So
sure.
that's another one. It's on the list of things like gotta get it, gotta read it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then they dove into the Batman animated series, and
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, oh shit, here we go. Of just how perfect that cartoon was and how they were just like, well, this is what cartoons were. And then we were told we didn't have to do that and make them
Mhm.
light and funny. And we could just tell the Batman we want to tell. And they did. And just with that voice cast and just the characters they created, because that's where Harley Quinn came from. I mean, if you don't have Batman animated series, we don't have Harley Quinn today. And we see how much money Warner Brothers is making off Harley Quinn. So we might not even know who Margot Robbie is if it wasn't for Batman the animated series.
True. I've always kind of said, God bless Bruce Timm and Paul Dini for that
Mm-hmm.
show. we're proof that that show works for people of from age, 4 to 40. Like
Yeah,
that was a cartoon for us when we were growing up, and I can still put that cartoon on today and be entertained,
yeah,
from beginning to end. They still hold up.
yep.
It's like the definitive Gotham City. Um, I still hear um what's the actor who passed away
Kevin
who voiced
Conroy.
that? Kevin Conroy. I still hear Kevin Conroy when I read Batman. They got him to do the voice in the Arkham games, which was a blessing. Like I still hear Mark Hamill when I'm reading Joker. Uh,
Yeah,
it's
that is Batman and Joker for
Yeah,
me,
it
and
is
obviously a lot of people, an
for a
entire
generation.
generation. That's what you hear.
Mhm. Yeah, those cartoons are great. That Gotham City was perfect. Like it was like a mix of modern, but also like 1920s gangster,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever, and just like you can't beat it. That's a classic show that will live forever.
yeah, yeah. It was. Yeah, there's not much more you could say to that. Just going through the '90s, and I mean, they did talk about the Batman movies. It was cool to see them kind of run through Batman's like feature film legacy,
Mhm.
Superman's feature film legacy. They did, like I said, a little heavy handed in the DCEU because that's the newest stuff. So they were making that all seem a lot more important. The only one they talked about making money was Aquaman because that's the only $1 billion one they actually had. Every other one they were like, oh yeah, we made this, we made
Right.
this, we made
Hmm.
this. And you're like, yes, you made them and they look cool in a sizzle reel, but
Right.
you only had one that actually made you money.
Yeah.
Um, so it was kind of funny to watch them do that, but that's fine, especially when they were showing Wonder Woman 84 to bring it back around.
Yeah, but like you said, we appreciate the legacy of DC films that's not the DCEU.
Yeah,
All those
100%.
all those Batman movies, the Superman movies, like another another thing that's just gonna live on with us forever. Batman '89 and the original Superman, just like you can't beat those. The Nolan movies are iconic,
Yeah.
and always will be. So Zack Snyder can't take that away from them or whoever else.
No, but I mean, Zack Snyder gave us Man of Steel, so
He did. He
that's all
did.
I really need, man. Seriously, like that movie was on I was watching that. I think it was like on TNT or something and I just put it on and I got sucked in. I was watching like a large chunk of it until I got bored with the commercials, but I'm sitting there like this movie is so good and you watch the whole scene with Kevin Costner and man, it just brings
Well,
it out of you,
yeah,
man. You just get all emotional.
that's Zack Snyder's legacy to me of for DC is Man of Steel. We could
Yeah,
just end it there.
yeah,
Yeah, I like Justice League enough, but it was no
yeah. He
Man of
tried a
Steel
bunch
is
of stuff. I
yeah.
mean, I maybe if it would have been more successful, but we've talked about many times why it wasn't successful and it was rushed and they just Warner Brothers wanted the money that they saw Marvel making and they wanted it now and they didn't want to put in the 10 years that Marvel put in. And I mean, that's ultimately what it came to. The fact that we were rushed in like two movies to get Justice League, you're like, really? We're going to
Mhm.
introduce Aquaman and the
Cyborg,
Flash
yeah,
and Cyborg in one movie. Like, what's wrong
yeah.
with you? Like, all three of those should have had solo movies before that. Was Wonder Woman even out before Justice League?
Um,
I can't remember. It was
was it? I
close.
mean,
It
I
was
know
either the
like
movie right before Justice League or the movie right after it. I think it was the movie right after it because in
it
Justice League, didn't they have like a thing where they showed a picture and it had Chris Pine in it?
possibly,
That could have been Batman versus Superman too. All those movies do.
yeah. I mean, iconically, the thing everyone remembers about Wonder Woman's introduction is it was totally at the wrong time. She didn't need to be in Batman versus Superman in a movie that was already bloated enough. Uh, so yeah, super rush job. We've talked about it plenty of times, but
Yeah,
that's just one of the many problems with that film that kind of just set them on a weird course that they never really recovered from, in my eyes.
yeah,
Ask a Zack Snyder head, and they'll tell you something completely different and wish death upon me
yeah,
for saying so. But I mean, anybody with a pair of eyes can tell that's when they kind of lost their way, lost the course of that
yeah.
whole Snyderverse.
And Wonder Woman was before. You had Man of
Okay,
Steel, and then the next second movie in this entire thing was Batman versus Superman.
terrible.
Then they did Suicide Squad, Wonder
Ugh.
Woman, and Justice League.
Yeah, that's the legacy.
That's the legacy. And then Aquaman came after that. And then we had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight other movies come out before we got a Flash solo film. Like,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Peacemaker came out. He was in Peacemaker.
Right, right.
It
It was
just,
wild.
yeah, it is
It's
wild.
been a wild ride. It's been a wild ride.
It has trying to keep up with them, and I mean, they've been putting out movies. They just, like I said, they just there's something about them. It's just there's not a magic. We everyone talks about Marvel and the MCU kind of losing magic post Endgame and really losing their audience post Endgame. They almost needed to do like a snap of their own or a flashpoint and reset everything and start over. What?
Well, there is. I know we don't love rumors here, but there is rumors out there that Secret Wars is going to kind of be a soft reboot after Secret Wars.
Okay.
They're gonna kind of like, I don't know, start it over, like do it over. Maybe
Yeah.
new actors, new cast, new, who knows. This is all rumors. I shouldn't even have said anything about it
No,
because
it's not going to happen, so it doesn't matter. Um,
well, we'll see.
no, that would be. I
Yeah.
mean, almost should have handled all of that differently and figure out. I don't know. The multiverse saga is just not working.
Yeah, it's not off to as good of a start as the Infinity Saga, and I know that we're talking about DC here today, but
Yeah.
just while we're on the topic of movie worlds and their issues, I just think part of it is they're trying too hard to recreate Infinity Saga with
Hmm.
multiverse. Like not every one of these films has to be a world ender. Like Ant-Man doesn't need to be saving the world from Kang in Ant-Man 3. Come on, guys. Like you didn't do that before. We had movies that were just like, okay, this is just the adventure of this is Winter Soldier. This is just Captain America and his buddy Bucky and their thing. The
Yeah.
world's not blowing up in this one. Like an alien isn't destroying the world. Like Kang isn't gonna destroy everything in this one. Like I don't know. Not every movie has to be on the same level of. They're trying to make all these end games, and none of them are end games.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just I don't know.
Yeah. Every threat doesn't need to be a cataclysm.
Yeah,
Doesn't need to
and
be the end of the world. We don't
you
need the
took
Eternals. They could have told a different Eternal story and not even have the damn thing on Earth, and it could have been
yeah.
more. That was kind of I feel like why I think it was still, if I remember correctly, it was still a world ender, but like Shang-Chi
Mm-hmm.
felt very self-contained.
Right.
Like it was almost in another dimension that they took place. They were kind of in another place. Yes, I think if the dragon would have got out, it would have destroyed the world or something. But I mean, it was still small.
Yeah, it
It
felt
was
like
an
something
intimate
like
story.
small enough for him. Like this is his corner of the world. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Not a not Ant Man has to save the human race.
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Uh,
Or Nick Fury. Now, hey, scrolls, they're here. We're fucked, but we don't need the Avengers. I got this. This is on me.
do you? The
Cool.
president almost just got assassinated, and the World
Your
War
friend's
Three.
dead. Everyone's dying. Yeah, everyone's dying around you.
It's like, hey, Nick Fury, shouldn't you probably call Thor for help with this one? Like, no, this is my fight.
I mean, at least call Hawkeye or somebody.
Yeah,
Somebody. You don't
and
have to call everybody, but just grab, one or two.
yeah,
But to bring it back to DC, it almost seems like that's what DC did when they started making this. They saw Man of Steel and they were like, okay, turn that into our cinematic universe. Let's connect all this stuff. This is our Superman, and they rushed it. And they tried to follow what Marvel is doing, just like Marvel is trying to recreate what Marvel did. And they're like, well, lightning doesn't always strike twice. So it's like just lean into the different and lean into the new and have fun with it. And they just don't seem like anybody is. It's following the dollar, which is part of our whole corporate structure.
yeah. Their biggest problem, like we've said it 100 times, was just trying to recreate Marvel's success.
Yeah.
When they should have just been focused on what's going to make us successful in a different way. There's no
And
reason in the world we should not have had a Ben Affleck Batman movie before Batman versus Superman. No reason. If you want that movie to be successful, Batman versus Superman, do your Batman movie first. You should have done your Batman movie first. No idea why you didn't. You threw Batman in here fighting Superman in his first appearance in your connected universe. Bad idea. It didn't. It was just bad idea from the start. And now we're hearing
And
all this stuff of what we missed out on a Ben Affleck Batman, which could have been really cool. They could have done it and made
you
it
know,
really good.
look at Batman versus Superman and really think about the Batman parts in that.
Mm-hmm.
They were amazing.
They were fun as hell.
Every Batman scene, every Batman action scene, everything that Ben Affleck did in that movie was awesome.
Yeah,
Until we get to the end and he's just now a dude with a gun
right.
who can't help because the enemies are too big.
The threat's too big for him.
Threat's
Yeah.
too big. He can't do shit against Doomsday. Like, what's Batman
Superman
gonna do?
can't do shit against Doomsday.
Yeah,
What's Batman
exactly.
gonna do? Yeah.
Well, yeah, what's Batman gonna do? That was always the curse of the whole plan. Is there's only so much Batman could do.
He's just running around the streets. Get back.
Get back, yeah. But I mean, everything up to that point, every scene with Batman where he was interrogating people, living in the shadows, turned into a horror movie, and they were all awesome. And if we would have got a Ben Affleck Batman movie first, if that would have followed Man of Steel and it was a dark, gritty Batman, kind of like The Batman was with Robert Pattinson, give us something like that, but kind of a Dark Knight Returns level of Batman, which is obviously what they were going for. Maybe throw what's her name, Carrie, as Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Like really lean into that like path of story, dude. That would have been just next level. And then when you put them together and you end that movie with the destruction of Metropolis,
Right.
and then you're just like, oh shit, like how pumped would you have been for Batman versus Superman?
Way more pumped than I was.
Like exactly, like, but I mean, when I was watching Batman versus Superman, I mean, the opening of that movie is badass. Like, I can't, all of those things have gold. Like Zack Snyder, I always like Zack Snyder. So
Okay. Yeah.
um
I got it.
there were moments of these movies that are awesome, but it's just like I said, it was so convoluted that it just kind of fell apart on him. But I
Yeah.
think most of that just became, we saw with Justice League Snyder cut. It's just there's so much interference and so much like, no, you need to do what we want. And he was
Mm-hmm.
fighting all of these people because they just wanted, they didn't care about the story or care about what they're doing. They were just rushing it. And it's just kind of a shame. And to see them brush over that a little bit was kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
I
I
knew
don't
they
think
would, but it's
I
fine.
don't think they really were interested in talking about it that much, to be honest. I think that's a point in their history that they are aware of and know the issues with it. And like I said, there's times when this doc felt like a promotional video for DC and Warner Brothers. So they're not really going to talk about their blemishes.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
but I
I
mean,
wouldn't either.
now,
And I mean, to their credit, they're going to try to do what they got to try to do. Yes, this year is not going to work as well for them. They might have, had some bad timing in announcing the James Gunn and the, some of these things, maybe waited until about now to do it, get some of these movies out and try to make some money. But they're trying, they're going to see what they could do. And James Gunn does kind of have an eye for some of these things and see what his Superman looks like.
so you're telling me you're not going to see Blue Beetle this weekend?
No,
Me neither.
no, I'm not. I don't know. It's just an origin story. No idea what it means from a extended universe, and there's not enough there to make me just be like, I want to watch this movie for what it is. And that's been the problem with DC movies this year. Has been like, well, this universe is dead, and the movies don't look good enough to make me want to see them on their own. So I'll wait for Max.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, I don't know. That's kind of our thoughts on the
Yeah.
movies. The one thing I will say is I've never been more intrigued and excited isn't the word. So I guess it's kind of intrigued. I've never been more intrigued about what their next thing looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So meaning the James Gunn era
Yeah.
and what's his Superman movie is going to be, and if he's really going to turn this thing around, like steer the ship in the right direction and put it on the right path. Um, we kind of talked about before. We both kind of agree he is a guy who could potentially do this.
Yeah.
If we're just basing it off of his work, um, say what you will about him, but the man's given us Peacemaker. We both love Peacemaker. We love the Guardians trilogy. Um, Suicide Squad was okay. I think that was him just kind of going a little overboard,
A little bit.
but it was still a well-made movie. So
Hmm.
like everything he's done so far has been pretty good, and so I don't know. I'm his Superman is probably my most anticipated thing to see. Just I just want to see what it looks like and get a feel for it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I haven't felt this way about a DC project. Well, Matt Reeves Batman excited me a lot, and I'm really looking forward to that sequel.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like James Gunn's Superman is very intriguing to me. I'm just very curious to see what's gonna go into that.
No, I 100% agree. Superman's always I don't read a lot of Superman comics or do anything, but a Superman movie, something about that character I just really like when it's done well. And I don't know, it's been done well a lot of times. Superman usually works pretty well. So I'm kind of here for a new Superman always. So
Yeah,
I'm ready for that. One of the other things I noticed coming back to the dock a little bit as we're wrapping up slowly. Jim Lee's the man,
always has been.
always has been, but just like seeing some of his art and just remembering like and looking at other stuff of just him drawing the X-Men and just realizing we talked about Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill were, like the voices of Batman and Joker. And Jim Lee is like the art for the X-Men for me. He's the art of Batman. Like when I think of Batman in my head, he looks like Jim Lee's Batman.
Yeah,
Just the way that he draws is just outstanding, and
yeah. Dude's a
love that
master.
he's out there doing his thing and leading it in. So it was really cool that he was in this talking. I mean, I know he's like the head of DC, so of course he was, but
Well, his story is interesting too. Like started at Marvel,
mhm,
um, drawn like you said, X-Men and other things. And then the whole way Image was founded with
yeah,
like him and Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson and Rob Liefeld and all those guys. How they there's a documentary about there out there about the um formation or founding of Image Comics that I've meant
mhm,
to watch for years. I
yeah,
would love to watch that someday. But and then going from that, then back to DC and somehow like working his way all the way up to like he's like at the top of the like he's the editor in chief or whatever you want to call it, the CCO. I think he's the chief creative officer.
yeah,
Um, just like his path through comics and still being like one of the best artists. Like it's crazy to me that dude is, if you could imagine the perfect life in comics, he's probably had it. It's still cool to see when he comes out every now and then and draws something. Because like, man, I know you're a busy dude. You still got time to draw a Superman page or something.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, always love Jim Lee, dude. I'm with you. X-Men,
yeah,
his X-Men is perfect. His Batman's perfect. He wrote there was a Superman book a few years ago called Superman Unchained that was art by Jim Lee, written by Scott Snyder. Like, can't beat that. Yeah, he's always
yeah.
been gold.
Loved seeing and hearing about Jim Lee and going through that. That was cool. Looking at all these artists like studios made me want a studio to like. I was like, I just wish I could draw all day. I know they talked about the grind, and I'm sure that
Mhm.
that's there, but I wish like that was something I would have kept up with and really like leaned into and just be able to just be like, I'm just gonna go in my room and draw for a while and just like,
His was perfect too. He had like a secret door he pushed,
yeah,
like in the closet, went back in this giant room. Like Jim Lee, why is your life everything I want?
yeah, right. Secret doors. And I mean, this made me really just, I mean, I do. If I still didn't read comic books, if I didn't have a whole pile behind me that I need to read, this would make me want to read comic books. Like I just came out of this documentary going, man, I just want to sit with my comic books and just like consume them, absorb them, like really look at the art. And sometimes I find myself just like, how fast can I read this? And it made me want to appreciate it more than I feel like I do sometimes. And just kind of that love for comics that really came through in this documentary of just being like, hey, comics are awesome. Comics
Hmm.
are really cool. There's a lot of stories that I sometimes wish aren't hidden in comics. We talked about this with The Last of Us and video games. Like, yeah, we've been playing stories like this, and you guys are missing it because you don't play video games until it becomes a TV. And, there's not that translation. There's never been really that translation of comic books. Yes, we've had shit tons of comic book movies, but they're all inspired and they're always changing something one way or another. So you never really get a full like adaptation of your favorite comic story with notwithstanding Zack Snyder's Watchmen.
Right.
That's the only other one that they've tried. They're like, we're going to do Pain for Pain. And I mean, to their credit, I think they did a pretty damn good job, admirable job of trying. It didn't always translate to the screen, but they didn't care.
Right.
But there was just tons of stuff in here, tons of stuff that I forgot about, tons of stuff that I didn't even know, and things that I just wanted to really dive into and just consume. And it just made me want to sit here with some music on, adventure music playlist on YouTube, and just read some comics and just fall into some of these stories. And like you said, we like to do a lot of creator owned, independent, and just kind of a little bit more wackier type stories, which are always fun and stuff that you can't do. They said, I think in the doc somewhere, we're only limited by our imagination. We're not limited by budgets. We're not limited by special effects. Can we do this? No, they're limited by their imagination. And can we draw it? If we can draw it, it's going to be in there. And just seeing this legacy of 100 years of comics or 90 years and seeing them do that and telling the stories within our culture was just really cool to see. So it's not a perfect documentary in any way,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of celebration in there that I had a lot more fun than I expected.
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It wasn't a perfect documentary, but at the end of the day, it was mostly about the comic books. That third episode got into pretty heavy into the like adaptations, but for the most part, that documentary was about this is comic books, and comic
Yeah.
books are cool. And I agree with you. It did make me want to sit down and read uh some more stuff and things I haven't read yet, and uh yeah, just a celebration of comic books, which is what we kind of wanted to see,
Yeah.
and we did get that. And I agree with you. Like there's stories in comic books that people watch like Batman movies and play the Batman video games, but in my mind, I was like, you're never gonna experience the Long Halloween though, like I have. You refused. If you don't read comic books, you're never gonna read this specific story. I want you guys to experience this
Right.
one day.
Right.
So, and the only way you can get that is if you sit down and read the book. And so, hopefully, some people watch this who are into DC because of the movies, and maybe it makes them want to read comics. Check out comic books a little more. Um, Maybe people like how me and you were before the New 52, like lapsed readers, will want to pick up a book again and be like, you know what? Let me get back into these comic books again. So yeah, if anything, if it's only good for that, that's kind of an accomplishment. So I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah.
We're fans of DC, just the idea of DC. We just want them to do it right and do it good, and it to be entertaining to us, and a lot of times it is. So uh, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah. They're the kings of the comic book world. And I mean, I read way more DC than I do Marvel these days. I know back in the 90s, I was like, Marvel, DC sucks, but it flip flops back and forth. But overall, it was a good watch. I really enjoyed it. Glad we did it. And thank you all for listening this far into our talk of Superpowered, the history of DC Comics, now streaming over on Max. 3 episodes, highly recommended. Let us know what some of your favorite DC comics are, just comics in general. We love all the different companies. Give me some Boom. I'll read Boom comics all day. So let us know what some of your favorite comics are, and you can do that by shooting us an email at raisedageek@gmail.com or hit us up on all the various social media outlets out there at Raised A Geek. And you can even subscribe. If you're watching this video, you can subscribe to the channel, so make sure you do that. We're over on YouTube at Raised A Geek, and leave a comment below in that, or shoot us an email or a message on social media. Let us know what some of your favorite comic books are, some of your favorite series. And if you've watched this show, what do you think about the documentary? What do you think about what they said in there and how we're kind of moved through and where you think comics will be in the future? So hopefully we're not anywhere close to another burst of the bubble of the comic world.
Never again, Chris. Never
Never
again.
again, never again. But I think that's going to do it for us this week. So for Raised a Geek, I'm Chris.
And I'm Don.
And thanks for checking out the show.
Where geek is all we speak.